Welcome, and today I have the honor and privilege to introduce you to His Excellency, the Most Reverend Joseph C. Bambera, Bishop of the Diocese of Scranton. Bishop Bambera, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Our viewers, our listeners, as we were talking before we came on, a lot of times people are busy and you're in and out, and sometimes they don't get to meet you, and you're a busy guy. You have a lot of things on your plate. Today we're going to talk about your trip that you had not too long ago. We'll talk about the 150th anniversary of the Diocese of Scranton, and we'll talk about Bishop Bambera. And I know you told me not to ask you this, but I am, because I have a friend named James, and he's an altar server in our parish. And James, we always tell the altar servers, you know, you do this well, and one day you're going to be the bishop. And his question to me was, what does the bishop do? And I said, that's a good question. I'll have to ask him that when I see him. And he said, I bet you he doesn't get to play outside very much. Is any of that true?
Where do you want to start with? What does a bishop do? A whole lot of things that I didn't necessarily anticipate he did when I received a phone call to be bishop. You know, this is my home diocese. I certainly am blessed to be the leader of the Catholic faithful in the Diocese of Scranton, the Roman Catholic faithful. I am blessed to have had wonderful parish experiences throughout the diocese and even in the greater Hazleton area when I served as pastor at St. John Bosco Parish in Cunningham from 1998 until 2001. In response to James's question, in some respects, my role is not dissimilar to that of a pastor in a parish. So while a pastor in a parish might find himself involved in all sorts of things, from ministering to the individuals who might be sick and suffering in a hospital, to working with a finance council to direct the future of the physical plant of a parish, to preparing individuals for sacraments, to celebrating the Eucharist, to trying to educate and raise individuals to a deeper awareness of what it means to be a Roman Catholic and what our faith is all about. I do that, but basically on a larger scale.
You sure do. How big is the Diocese of Scranton?
Well, we cover the 11 counties of northeastern and north central Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And we have 120 parishes. So there are a lot of things happening and a lot of wonderful things. Then it's my responsibility really to be the shepherd of the local shepherds and to have that great ability to look broadly over this diocese to ensure that while each parish has its own particular characteristic and culture and flavor, to ensure that basic principles of the mission of the church are given the opportunity to grow and flower in each one of our parishes and amongst our people. Tied in with all of that is a wonderful invitation to serve, because really for all of the things that we talk about with regard to living out our faith, and that it's my responsibility to oversee, the need to put our faith into practice, to take what we receive in our experiences of the Mass and the sacramental life of the Church and in what we learn and how we understand our faith. It's so vital that we then not simply talk about it, but we give our faith a voice and a heart and hands, and that we serve our brothers and sisters as Jesus commands us.
So how long have you been the bishop of the diocese now?
I'm bishop of the diocese for about 8.5 years. I was appointed and I was ordained on April 26th, 2010, and so I'm moving into my 9th year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you must have seen a lot of changes as we're talking about consolidations and different things like that. Would you say that, again, I go back to my friend James, children, so important in the diocese as they're growing up, and were you an altar server?
I was.
Aha, so James was right.
That's right.
You certainly were busy.
Tell James to hang on.
Tell him to hang on.
Right.
During the time that you have been the bishop of here in the Diocese of Scranton, as you mentioned the fact that you are local and you grew up here locally, did that make a difference?
I think it did. You know, from my perspective, oftentimes it's not regularly the case that a bishop would be appointed to his home diocese. That would be a little bit more exceptional than the rule. Most of my bishops who are colleague bishops would know that I'm in my home diocese, because I think to a certain extent that might be an enviable position. But after having dealt with it for 8 years, sometimes people will say, well, what's the best part about being bishop in your home diocese? And I'll say, well, you know people and they know you. And then they say, well, what's the worst part about being a bishop in your own diocese? And you say, well, you know people and they know you. But from my perspective, if I had to weigh it, I feel very, very privileged in being in my home diocese. I do know our priests who are wonderful servants. I know so many of the religious and a whole lot of lay faithful throughout this diocese of Scranton. You know, as I said, I was assigned to Cunningham back in the late 90s. Spent a good portion of my ministry in Lackawanna County, and actually began as a deacon, an ordained deacon in Bradford County, up in Sayre. So I have a pretty decent sense of the life and flavor of our diocese, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
That's what I was going to say. There is a lot, and it's a big area.
It is.
Has it always been this big of an area when you talk about the Diocese of Scranton?
Well, I mean, our diocese was founded 150 years ago this year. And when it was founded, it included 10 counties, okay? But it didn't receive, when it eventually went to 11 counties, that didn't mean that we added territory to it. I think it was simply the fact that Luzerne was split into Luzerne and Lackawanna counties.
Yes.
So it's always been the 11 counties of northeastern and north central Pennsylvania. But it has evolved over the years. Just this past week, I was privileged to celebrate Mass at St. Augustine's Church in Silver Lake. And that is the first church that was ever founded in the Diocese of Scranton in 1825. Now, the diocese was founded in 1868. So, you know, do the math. That's 43 years before the diocese was founded. The first Catholic presence, not parish, but the first Catholic presence was actually in Bradford County near Wyln, in a French community that settled here.
Wow. And
then the first parish was founded about 32 years later. So we're talking, you know, the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 19th century. And St. Augustine's was founded in 1825 by a missionary priest from Ireland, Father Jeremiah O'Flynn, who came to this part of Pennsylvania and founded a parish. And it's interesting how the first roots of our diocese were in the more northern counties of our region, close to the New York State border. And then as populations grew, the real population centers emerged more south, east, and west: Williamsport, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and Hazleton.
And what history! Amazing history.
Absolutely.
And I know, as you mentioned, which I'm glad you did, the 150th anniversary. And there is just so much when you think about all of the ways that people went to church. And now we're fighting for a parking space.
Sure. Well, when I celebrated Mass up in Silver Lake as a kind of a just an opportunity to celebrate the 150th anniversary and the fact that that was the first recognized church in our region. They met me with a horse and buggy, a distance away from the church, and so that's how I arrived. So yeah, I mean, things have really changed. But what I thought was so significant was the fact that when we celebrated Mass in St. Augustine's Church this past Sunday morning, we celebrated the same Mass that people celebrated back in 1825. And that has this incredible such an incredible reminder to us that what we celebrate is rooted in a gift that's 2,000 years old, in the presence of Jesus in our world, and that the gifts of Jesus, the message of the gospel, and the values of the gospel, for all of the incidentals that have changed in terms of the language that we use, in terms of some of the mechanisms that we employ to convey the message, the very basic heart and soul and substance of the gospel has remained the same.
Because when you say 150 years for the diocese, and then when you think about where it all evolved from,
Sure.
it's a drop in the bucket.
Sure, absolutely.
It doesn't seem. But when we talk about, again, the changes in the church and so many, you look back at that time and you think, oh, wow, when people came to church, they still had the same faith and the same beliefs that they had 2,000 years, and let's hope that continues.
Sure. And there was a richness of individuals who came to this diocese. The area that I celebrate at Mass in at St. Augustine's was predominantly made up of Irish immigrants, hence Father O'Flynn. But if you were to look at the town where I grew up, Carbondale, there were, if you just looked at the churches that existed when I was a little boy, and most of them are still there, save one, you had St. Rose Church where I grew up, and that was predominantly, although it was called a territorial parish, and it didn't necessarily invite individuals of a particular ethnic background, took everybody. It was predominantly Irish. There is Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church, which is in another section of the city, and that is predominantly an Italian community. There's St. Michael's Church in the neighboring town where my great-grandparents were founding members, and they were from Poland. And then there was another church that's now closed, Holy Trinity, where the roots are in Slovakia. So there's a richness that came to this country to our diocese, I should say, in the earliest days of its life, both prior to and subsequent to its founding in 1868. And there's still a richness coming. Certainly in the greater Hazleton area, we are blessed with an influx of Hispanic communities that bring a great wealth of experience and faith and culture to our area.
And in Wilkes-Barre too,
Absolutely.
as well, with the
Absolutely.
different, and a Spanish Mass is fascinating.
Sure.
It's absolutely fascinating. Well, that brings to me your trip. And because of the fact that we have such a diverse group of people that live in our area, the churches, the way that they were all brought up, how did that impact the trip that you went on? Can you tell us a little bit about how all that came about?
Sure. Well, first of all, sometime before that trip, not an extended period of time back, but about 2 weeks before that trip, the national bishops met for their annual spring convocation. And it was in the context of that one of the issues that has been a very, very significant focus for the bishops of the United States, and particularly for Pope Francis, was the place of immigrants, and particularly refugees, individuals who are fleeing oppression and really literally fleeing for their lives and their well-being. And of course, the Holy Father has called us to be extremely considerate of those individuals who are looking for a place, a haven of safety for themselves, and a place where they might begin to grow and flourish in their lives as family members and as members of a community. So there was some great concern expressed by the bishops when we had been informed that there was, related to the current administration's decision with regard to having in place some deterrents for illegal immigrants coming into our country, that one of those deterrents, as at least it was explained, would be that families would be separated when they came across the border if they were not coming in legally. And obviously, we need to protect our borders. We have a right to do that and a responsibility. And certainly, we would like to see individuals who are coming to this country do so legally for their own sakes and for ours as well. But clearly, when you look at the fact that families were being separated, mothers and fathers from sons and daughters, particularly young children, I think we all understand that if we were to translate that into our lives,
It wouldn't
with,
go over
with
well.
our sons and daughters being separated from us, we would say that there needs to be a better way. And thankfully, the administration issued, the president issued the executive order rescinding that decision.
Right.
And these families are coming back together again. And that's a very good and a positive thing, and we're extremely grateful for that. But to put it in the broader context, that was what precipitated the trip that was conducted to the border. About a week after that meeting of the bishops, I got a phone call and was invited to participate in it. And
Now that must be a whole other story in itself.
well, it is to a certain extent. I thought there were probably going to be about 50 bishops going to the border, and then it was a little bit complicated to put together because it was all happening so quickly, and it all had to be adjusted and modified on the spur of the moment because it was going through, there were government permissions that
I'm
had
sure.
to be secured. So finally, one day, I asked the question of the individual who was contacting me from the Bishops' Conference, and I said, so who all's going on this trip? And he said, well, besides Cardinal DiNardo, who's the president of the Bishops' Conference, and Archbishop Gomez, who's the vice president, it will be you and another bishop plus the bishop that's in Brownsville, Texas. So I realized then that it was a very small group, and I felt extremely blessed and very fortunate to be, and humbled to be
Really?
a part of that group. Of course, my curiosity always gets the best of me, and I wanted to know why my name surfaced. And essentially, I was informed that among the bishops who would be there was a desire to have at least one of them not necessarily be a bishop from the borders, but a bishop who might be a little bit removed from the immediacy of the issue, who would bring maybe a little bit more of an objective perspective in terms of what's going on.
But again, that's where your background comes in.
Well, I was very, very well pleased to be a part of
Yes.
it, and so honored to be able to represent the growing Latino and Hispanic community in the Diocese of Scranton. And so it was just really a very, very significant trip for me that really provided me with the opportunity to become a little bit better versed in a very, very complicated situation.
Now, when you say border, where exactly were you?
We visited McAllen, Texas. That, in many respects, while the issue of border security and individuals coming across the border is just the entire Mexican-U.S. border, McAllen is in some respects ground zero for a lot of different reasons. And so McAllen is the place where, the images that have come across newsreels of the infamous center where there's the chain link fence and the kids, sleeping under the Mylar blankets, or the Casa de Padre, which was the Walmart pic. Perhaps you've seen images of that.
Right.
That's all in McAllen and the Brownsville area, and we were very fortunate to be able to witness both the challenge that is being posed to refugees who are coming across the country, the challenge that many workers on the border have to face every day, and the great, great blessing of volunteers and aid workers, particularly those who would be working with, say, for example, Catholic Social Services of the Diocese of Brownsville and other helping organizations.
And again, Catholic Social Services, something our area can also relate to.
Absolutely.
Because it's from the diocesan annual appeal.
Absolutely.
The money goes right to there.
Absolutely. And we had the really unique and very fortunate opportunity to visit a respite center that is run by Catholic Social Services. This center would be a kind of a transition place where individuals who have begun to be processed would have the opportunity to come and rest for a bit with their families, have some food, and then ensure that they got bus tickets to travel to sponsoring families or maybe relatives as they wait for their cases to be adjudicated. And what a powerful, powerful place that was, just to see the goodness of Sister Norma Pimentel, who works for that agency and really is a great instrument of peace and justice, and so many volunteers. That was one place, though, where I think so many of the concerns that are raised by many individuals really melted away for me. I talked to a number of families, and there was a little bit of relief there because they had been processed, they were together, not separated, and they were on their way to a better place.
So now that you bring all this back with you, how have you been sharing all of this experience with the members of the diocese?
Well, certainly through opportunities like we have right now to be able to speak, but more in terms of opportunities that I'm given, whether in a homily, an article, or a conversation, that we just all realize the great, great gift and blessing that we all are one to another, and the importance of us really respecting those individuals who are literally, in many instances, fleeing for their lives. We can say that, well, they're coming through illegally and that's wrong. Well, something that's illegal is illegal, and make no mistake about it. But we have entered, as a country, decades ago, treaties with other countries that say there are exceptions. And that would be for refugees, individuals who are fleeing for their lives. I said to one father, well, I actually said to many of them, but one father responded in a way that I'll never forget. His name was Pedro. He was from Honduras. I said, "Why did you leave your homeland?" And he pointed to his son and his daughter in the room. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I had to flee the gangs." He said, they make me pay rent on my house." I said, "Did they own your house?" He said, "No, I do. But I have to give them money." And I said, "What happens if you don't?" He said, "They'll burn my house down, they'll rape my daughter, or they'll kill my son." That's why I came. And when we can look at the struggles that other human beings are experiencing, for all the struggles that we face, and for all the needs that we have to protect our country, and they are significant, we have to think of a better way to respond to other human beings. This is a right to life issue.
Well, it certainly is. And when we talk about such things happening, and we're almost in a vacuum because we don't realize you had the opportunity to travel there. And what a beautiful experience that you were able to bring back. That's wonderful. And I can't even imagine what was going through your head before you even got there. But then to see all these little faces,
Sure.
And it must have been just breathtaking.
It was heartbreaking in some respects, especially in the one center that we visited, Casa de Padre. That's the Walmart I referenced, refurbished. It's very nice on the inside. It's very comfortable. It's air conditioned. There's nice cafeteria. There's decent quarters. There's recreation rooms, and there were 1,200 boys there, all separated from their families. Not separated as the families were being separated recently. These kids come across as unaccompanied adults. Excuse me, unaccompanied youth. And what that means is that for any child who comes across the border, these kids aren't traveling on their own.
Right.
Nobody goes across the border on their own. It's too dangerous. These kids are coming with maybe a grandparents or aunts and uncles. And if you come across the border with anybody who is not your mother or your father, you're separated from them.
Wow.
We don't even think about that. So I reflect back to my dad. He's passed away 14 years ago. But his mom died when he was 3.
Oh.
And he was the only people that he knew as his parents were his grandparents. And if he was coming across today, he would be separated from them. The only people that he knew as the people who raised him.
See, it's a whole different perspective
Yeah,
when you bring it home
Yeah.
to yourself.
That's right.
And when we're talking about all of the different things that you witnessed there, and I know that you are dealing with a lot of things here.
Sure we are.
And we're dealing with our own things within our diocese, within our state. And I just have to say that I can't imagine how you're able to deal with seeing that and then coming back here and dealing with all this grand jury.
There are a lot of issues that we face, and quite honestly, as difficult as the grand jury report will be when it comes out, it is necessary for us to confront it. It is the only way for victims to be heard and for us to begin the further efforts that we need to make to respond to their situation, to begin the healing, and to build upon the things that we have begun to do in the last 10 years, 10, 15 years, to really make a difference. So it will be painful, but it really is the only way for us to start the healing process.
And then when you think of so many of these people that want to come to the United States and are willing to risk their lives and everything in order to get here, that says something about our country.
It says a whole lot. It says a whole lot about the wonderful people who are a part of our church and well beyond that. You know, we are very blessed, and at our core, we do realize how fortunate we are to have what we've been given in this country.
So I'm going to give you the last word. And the last word, especially for the young people in the diocese who are going to be the next generations, because I know my great aunts are all gone and they took me to church, and now we see these things changing. As the bishop, as the leader of our diocese, what words would you give to them?
I was given a very important lesson by a young person. A couple of years ago, we have a large youth rally every year called
Yes.
Light the Fire. And at the end of a Mass that I celebrated, the first year that I did it as bishop, a young lady came up to me and she said, "Bishop," she said, "can I tell you that I disagreed with something you said in your homily?" I said, sure. I thought, I don't know what I said. And she said, "You said young people were the future of the church." And I said, "Well, yeah, I did, and you are." And she said, "Well, that's true," but she said, "to say that we're the future only is to imply that we're not a part of the church today." And we are. And I never forgot that, and I never will. So to the young people, thank you for being the great example that you are to your generation and to mine, and continue to give life to the church that has touched you.
I don't think anybody could have said it any better. So kudos to that young lady. And as I started out with my friend James, who I guess now, if hopefully he's watched the interview and now he knows what the bishop does. And I understand you do have favorite recipes?
I do, but we don't have time to go into those things.
Well, that must be very difficult, especially around church picnic season.
Well, to be honest with you, I do. If I can eke out an evening that's free, I do kind of enjoy cooking for myself or my family or friends. So that's kind of one of the things I'll do to relax.
And it must be difficult to try to get to all those parish picnics.
I get to the parishes, I do have to make a confession that if I got to all the picnics, we might not have enough room in this corner for me to sit down. So
because it's all those good ethnic foods.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, Bishop Bambera, this has been a treat, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And we certainly hope that you enjoyed your time as well with Bishop Bambera of the Diocese of Scranton. And hopefully, before he celebrates his next 10 years, 9 years, we'll have to have him back with us again. I'm Paula Degnan. Thank you for joining us.